Testing, testing. Ah, these are actually already working. Okay, my name is Antonia, and I would like to thank you all for, for coming here and for wanting to hear about the rights of LGBT people and women in Europe. And I will not talk too much because we have our dear guests and Marina as a moderator for that. So I'd just like to introduce them to you briefly. Moderator is Marina Škrabalo from Foundation Solidarna from Croatia. And next to her we have Karolina Vješkevic. Wow, good, great. From Lambda Warsaw and Abortion Dream Team. Feminist and activist from Poland. And also we have Florin Buhuceanu from ACEPT, Romania, and European Network on Religion and Belief. Great. And also we have Keenan Russell, who is UN officer and works at Transgender Europe. So I hope you will enjoy this discussion. Thank you all for coming here.
Hello, and thank you, Rijeka, for hosting a Smoqua Festival. And it is wonderful to be in a city where we enter the city council hall with a rainbow flag, and where the city council is a space where we can discuss the current state of women's and LGBT rights, LGBT and women's rights across Europe. The purpose of this panel is to explore the dynamics across the continent, with special focus on the current backlash staged by radical and religious right, but also in light of the emancipatory struggles across the continent, which have achieved really a lot over the past couple of decades. We can immediately connect the two focal themes of the panel, LGBT rights and women's rights, in the scope of a common struggle for gender equality, which is not emancipatory if it does not recognize gender diversity and freedom of gender expression as an integral component of gender equality. So it would be interesting, and this is a unique opportunity, to really look at the dynamics of activism and emancipatory struggles, the institutional achievements, in light of the backlash of which we are all very strongly and very even physically aware. I would also, as a moderator, like to extend greetings to everybody in Rijeka from Zagreb, where this morning we just had a roundtable and a public presentation on Christian fundamentalist networks across Europe. And I'm very happy to say and to greet Mr. Neil Data and Remi Bak from the European Parliamentary Forum for Population and Development, specializing in protection and promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights, especially at the EU policy level. And I'm very happy that Neil and Remi will have opportunity to take part in the discussion and in the follow-up networking. Also sometime, at some point, either during our discussion or at the end as a dessert, we will show a 15-minute trailer of Arte documentary, investigative journalist documentary, on, it is called Abortion, a Backlash in Europe, which is actually giving us a close-up into the maneuvering and the tactics and the damage produced by the so-called pro-life, but actually anti-choice, anti-gender movement across the continent, which is going to leave its print on Rijeka on Saturday, but is obviously also doing a lot for counter-mobilization around the emancipatory agenda through the Walk for Freedom that is being organized by Rijeka civil society organizations and initiatives. So, not to spend a lot of time, but this is some kind of framework. So the idea is not to get out of here completely depressed, but actually encouraged and inspired to look for opportunities, tactics, and strategies of both resistance and resilience, but also for using the times of crisis as an opportunity for bringing in more people who are maybe only now, when things are getting really tough, recognizing how important it is for all of us to ensure that our societies are societies based on non-violence and freedom, and not on violence and oppression. So, let me start. I would like to ask just a warm-up question for our speakers and friends and comrades. The first question would be for Carolina, Florin, and Keenan, for each one of you. What does it feel like today in the environment where you are operating from your neighborhood, your town, your country, and Europe as your continent? What does it feel like to be LGBT rights and women's rights activists today? What does it feel like?
It's great, of course, and I love my activism, but it is quite frustrating because I feel like we've been pushed to the corner from which we just have to defend ourselves, and that fundamental things such as sexual and reproductive rights and things that are ours and that define us, that are so important in our lives, that we have to still fight for fundamental things, and that we've, in a way, as societies, we've been taught that these are problematic things, that these are, it's a matter of, in Poland, it's like politicians, they did a great job actually convincing the whole society, media, and everyone that it's about beliefs, that it's about your views on life, that these are very delicate things not to be talked about in the parliament, not to be, tackled, although in the first place, a lot of things did happen in the parliament that result in the fact that we cannot be free in terms of our sexuality. And it took place there, but all of a sudden, now it's not a place to talk about it. And of course, I'd rather not talk to politicians about it. I'd just rather have it and, enjoy it, and really tired of protesting, this shit still. Sorry, that's a quotation. So it's really, I would rather live in a normal, circumstances, and really not, negotiate that all over again. So it's quite frustrating that we still have to negotiate fundamental things, because there has been so much work done to convince the societies that we live in that these are things, that private, in a way bad, that we should not talk about our experiences, our lives, that we should constantly negotiate piece by piece what we can have, and that maybe in some time, societies will be ready to, accept civil unions, and that's gonna take so much time. And it's, of course, no adoption, right? Because it's just gonna take another 30 years. And that, in a way, we adjusted to that as activists as well, that we really try to take it step by step, that we are not, for instance, as pro-choice movement in Poland, we're like, oh my God, just let's have it, legal until 12th week, and then maybe something. And, and people like me who say, like, I don't want any abortion law at all, I just don't feel like it should be a law on abortion. I want Canada, it's like I want it to be treated as every other health service. So I don't want a separate law on that. And it's like, no, but easy, step by step, So we're even afraid of talking what we really want, that we want equality with like full range of rights, and we are forced to take it step by step. And when we are, ready to do that, when we are, empowered enough to say no, like at the end of the road, it's freedom of abortion and full equality, and I'm gonna say it out loud until we reach that, I'm not happy. That even our own movements are shushing us and saying, no, let's start with contraception or whatever, or let's start with civil unions, like don't mention adoption or whatever. So I think that's frustrating, that in a way, we as movements also internalized that and accepted the fact, and we built our strategies on what we can do, because if we say too much, they're gonna say that we are not good, that we are, I don't know, rude feminists who just are out there screaming, And even if we're nice, nobody's listening to us. So it's like, it's really, feminism is not hated because it's not nice, it's because it's dangerous. And, we don't have to be nice, and we should fight, but it's still, I think that we have this defense position, and that's what frustrates me in a way. So, yeah, but I still love it. And I'm still gonna do this, promise.
Sometimes I do feel like a very important person in a country which, like Romania, which decriminalized homosexuality only at the end of 2001. So we were the last country in the region that started to treat us in a non-penitentiary way, if I can use this expression. For me, being a very important person means that I'm still treated like a kind of disruptive, toxic, dangerous stranger in my society, and that means being treated as a kind of public enemy. We are still considered public enemies, ideological creatures against norms and normality, against traditions and against God, against religion. And that makes you feel, important. So we have an important role to play in the societies, apparently. As a gay man and also as an LGBT activist, I feel that we just started our public activity, because for so long we were invisible. We were not being treated as, ordinary citizens of the Romanian society. So it's the time of creating a kind of new identity for each of us and for all of us collectively. And this should be done, of course, in the most radical way. And speaking about radicalism, we are already treated as radical creatures. And I guess that we need to respond in the most radical way, simply because we have to smash down these types of stereotypes and prejudices which are part of our societal culture. On the other hand, I feel privileged that I can do this work, because it's really important work, not just for myself, but for the whole Romanian society. And I'm glad to be here. I want to say that simply because Croatia actually already offered us a lot. Marina traveled to Romania several months ago, last year, for a very important meeting, and I will tell you later about that meeting. And we realize that we are in that moment in our history in which we really have to be the radical guys of our societies. Otherwise, we have no chance of survival in a society that is changing in a negative way constantly. So I feel like the disruptive stranger, if I can reduce my speech, a VIP.
Let's see, can we make this?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can. Okay, great. 2013, 2014, the Pope was quoted as saying that trans people are more dangerous than nuclear weapons to the world. And quite frankly, I love that. Because, I mean, yeah, we are. Colonial Europe destroyed concepts of diversity and complexity and gender and sexuality, and is now realizing how much damage was caused by doing that, how much we lost in terms of the ways that we think about ourselves and are able to talk about ourselves, and instead created this system that's so rigid and so oppressive and pits people against one another instead of allowing us to play and discover who we are and how we want to be in the world. And so I love thinking of myself as dangerous as nuclear weapons. And I kind of think that for a lot of non-trans people, that's true if I were to push you as far as possible, because a lot of the assumptions that we live in are connected at some points back to sex, gender, or bodies, and the value of bodies. In terms of how I feel as well, I have sort of two other tiny thoughts. One of them is that for trans folks in particular, the maybe last 3 years worth of heavily increased media attention makes it so a lot of us spend a lot of time anxious because our bodies and our identities and the ways that we navigate our bodies are on display, and not only on display, but in fact open for public debate. And that's exhausting. And so organizations like mine are, in part, exist to deflect some of that away from individuals and onto an organization that can carry that level of scrutiny. But it's a tiring experience. It's tiring to have people stare. It's tiring to know that people are whispering about you, and it's tiring to know that as soon as you come out, everyone in the room is thinking about the most private parts of your body and your sex life and your relationships. It's exhausting. That said, that increased level of attention has also made it so that we, as a community, are communicating with each other more. And being forced to battle with complex disagreements among the community, with diversity and oppression within our community and the ways that we replicate systemic oppressions. And you see that in a small scale all across the world, all across Europe. And I find that really exciting, that we're sort of being dragged kicking and screaming into a more complicated understanding of privilege, of power dynamics, and that our movement, the trans movement, our goals are not goals that belong only to trans people. They're goals that belong to everyone, to be able to be seen before the law, to be able to access your general human rights. And we can't do analysis that's valuable unless we analyze ourselves as well. And I find that to be a really empowering moment to be in.
So that we have positioned our speakers' experiences and even, as I said, physical experiences of living the battle in a very challenging context. Now in the next round, let's focus on the context itself. So Carolina, you already started a little bit, but we are following, I guess most of the people here are following the situation in Poland, and we have general idea of systemic institutionalized oppression of women's reproductive rights that has been, systematically introduced in Poland. We also know less about what has been happening with the institutional regime of the treatment of LGBT rights. All of that, once upon a time, used to be a part of the EU acquis and the conditioning for the entry also of Poland into the EU. But today, nowadays, it doesn't really seem to matter because the EU is struggling with even greater issues of the basic functioning of the judicial system in Poland, looking for ways to pressure through very complicated processes, as we know, at the council, where it is not very feasible that there will be really a political sanctioning. But we know that the whole context is very complicated. But what is the most important for all of us here is to learn from Carolina, what is the current dynamic of your resistance? And how is the resistance going? You have mentioned frustration, exhaustion, internalized, internalization of the normalization of the taboo and the oppression. Can you share with us what is the current situation, what is the dynamics of the resistance movement, a little bit about the alliances, because what we all know, there were huge protests in Poland. It could have been done by activists themselves, but it should have meant that many ordinary people have been brought in. So what's going on? How are the alliances holding on?
How much time do you have?
You have no 5 minutes. Just like
That's challenging. Yeah, I've been an activist for a long time, and I feel like it seems like it's been, the past 2.5 years where everything just dropped, like it got worse. That's not true. It's been going on for 25 years. And it has never been any political party that took women's rights, LGBT rights, and all other important issues to be the most important ones. And it is because of that our government right now can do what they do, because nobody has prepared this country, my country, for actual resistance of that, because they are not really taking away anything. It's been taken away years ago. It has never been given, at some point also in terms of gender recognition. It has never been given. So there is not much to take from us. Of course, the institutional crisis, the judicial system, that's, more or less that was established and, strong in a way. But still, the previous party that was in force for 8 years, and, they were so focused on just being re-elected that they did nothing to prevent what's going on right now. They were so cocky in a way that they will always be in power, that they did nothing to prevent what's happening right now, because they had to lose at some point, and they lost because they were doing absolutely nothing. And what really is now frustrating is the fact that, a lot of people think that it's just so much worse now that we need them. I mean, we don't need them. They did nothing for us. They are responsible for the fact that we do not have Gender Recognition Act. They are responsible for the fact that there is absolutely no abortion access, and other things, that there are no laws to protect lives of LGBT people in terms of their private lives, but also to protect them from hate crime, and other forms of discrimination and violence, and they didn't do anything. So right now there are massive movements, and I know that they are so massive that they, finally, like, we got on the spot in a way. Now it's just so bad in Poland, but it had been like this before. And I remember years when we have draft laws very similar to what we're having right now, and it was 70 of us in front of the parliament. And it was because we as society felt so safe that it's not gonna go through, because it was Civil Platform who was in charge. Of course, the conservatives do not have majority, although Civil Platform is a conservative party. It's just, and all of a sudden when this new political party, after 8 years of not being in power, which frustrated them a lot, and they got a lot worse, you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, they're gonna do this, now we have to, you know, resist. But in terms of abortion, these people who, you know, came massively to the streets, and I'm not really trying to say that black protests were nothing or something, but still these people are like, this is the first time that they even think about abortion, which is good at some point, you know, finally, you know, they woke up. They woke up because somebody told that they would go to jail for miscarriage, you know, and at some point that, you know, crazy people from Ordo Juris that are really spreading their, you know, thoughts around the region, they did us a favor in a way. You know, if they did that in a way that it's gonna be just limitation of abortion on the ground of fetal malformation, they would have had that law already. But they went to the edge, totally crazy, and that's like, oh my God, we don't want to go to jail, you know? And so also it was good in a way that those people woke up, but bad in a way that they started to protect the law that we already have, which is totally, you know, it's a ban on abortion, and nobody understands this as such. Like, that's why, like, you know, it's another reason to love Croatia, because when I come here, you understand what ban on abortion is. And in Poland, we don't understand, you know, the fact that we cannot get an abortion except for 3 very narrow cases is not considered a ban on abortion, believe it or not. Believe it, it's like this. So it's really, you know, and now it's like, it seems like it's worse and worse. And no, it's been going on for years. Also the influence of the church. And our abortion law is 25 years old. And the Law and Justice never, ever tried to change it. It's civil initiatives every year since a long time that is doing that. And of course they have to deal with that, they have to, you know, like find, but they never wanted to do this because they know that the ones who vote for them do not want a total ban on abortion. But when we think about it from the pro-choice movement, is still this, you know, defending the status quo and not really saying what we really want. So that's, I would say that that's the context of I would say that it's a new movement that is growing, but it's full of stigmatization of abortion, and that's not going to change much. You know, when we think about abortion as something that is just the very last thing that one can do when everything fails, you know, and when you really cannot have a child, then maybe you can have an abortion, then, you know, I am just sick of that. So, you know, as you said, I'm this, you know, problematic radical person who goes on the cover of the magazine smiling and saying that abortion is okay. And because I just think that, you know, and I think that if we do not speak about that in a normal way, that it's okay to have sex, and then you have sex, you can get pregnant, and if you get pregnant and you don't want to be pregnant, it's okay to have an abortion, because that's a solution to pregnancy, you know, not contraception, because, you know, like, it's just too late. so, you know, and it's a common experience, that 1 in 3 has had it, and or will have it in their lifetime. So it's really, it's just, you know, kind of just stop being really defensive. And I think another thing that we are struggling with is lack of solidarity of fights, you know? We fight for LGBT rights, we fight for women's rights, we fight for rights of people with disabilities, but we don't see that they're not separate groups. It's not that, you know, like, we are different people, and we have all these characteristics that, you know, that put us in a situation that we need support, that we need rights, that we need things, you know? And what is really interesting is that we are now having this protest of people who are taking care of adult people with disabilities that had to, you know, quit their jobs, and they are doing this on a daily basis, and they do not have anything. And they've been in the parliament for 30 days now. And do you know who is in front of the parliament to support that protest? Feminists, not pro-lifers, you know, as they call themselves. And they actually in media go and say like, oh, this is not, like, this cash that you want for life, you know, is not what we would give you. And of course, it's just, I think that's quite, you know, almost the end of the pro-life movement in Poland, because it's just really visible that what they care is the life until birth. Only unborn children are taken into consideration, and it's really it's just pure hypocrisy especially when they're fighting for limitation of abortion on this ground, basically, or right now. So these are feminists who are out there, abortionists, myself, anti-fascists, who are out there and saying, we support you. We want you to finally speak for yourself, because that's the very first time when people with disabilities came to the streets claiming their needs, their rights. And there are LGBT movements as well that are supporting that, and we need that. We need to realize that the oppression that we are all facing comes from the same system, comes from the same mechanisms. That is connected with capitalism, that is connected with distribution of powers, and that is also the fact that we are not together in that is somebody's work for years to pit us against each other, to make us believe that we have separate interests, which is not true. And for a long time, the feminist movement forgot that there are not only cis women who get pregnant, so it's really time to really, also reconsider our language, to start talking about people who can get pregnant and people who need abortion. And a big part of the women's movement in Poland is not ready for that. I remember when we had a problem when we had a trans man who was speaking on demonstration on abortion for the first time publicly saying, I have sex with men, I have uterus, I have ability to get pregnant, I need contraception, and I might need an abortion one day. We were hated for that. The women's movement, this big black protest movement, on internet was like, a gay with a uterus on a women's demonstration? Are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, you are kidding me. So it's really like the amount of homophobia and transphobia that was there, was really, so we do not see that as a common fight. And that's the most dangerous thing, because I see that as a result of a big, big effort that was put for years for us to feel that we have separate interests. That if we say abortion, that maybe we're not saying, marriage equality, or that if we are saying abortion, we are not saying gender recognition. And it's really not like this. But in a way, and of course there are the movements of people with disabilities also do not maybe see that it's possible, that all those, crazy feminists who, go out there and shout about abortion are right now, cooking us food so that we have something to eat when we are sitting there, that they're coming every day to support us and building all this. And it's just, weird, but it's not weird. It's just the way to go, to see that solidarity is the way to do that, and that we need to stay in solidarity. And it's, with very many different areas that seem to be separated from one another, and we had our separate fights. But that's just not going to work until we realize that we are in all this together. And the reason that we are in this place right now is because of the same mechanisms, about the same, political process that was going on. And we need to see that and have the whole society to be to see that and share that view, because otherwise, it just won't work.
Thank you, Carolina. Just one very optimistic insight that you shared with us, and that is that you said that people in the public are recognizing, now it is becoming clear that this pro-life movement is actually focused on unborn, but not on the born protection of born living human beings that live with their imperfections, challenges, problems, and oppression. So the public is seeing that this is present, this narrative is present in the public now. This criticism of or if you can explain on that. And the second thing that you shared, you do get on the covers of the magazines, which means that there might be some media space for action, because that's a sub-question that I wanted to ask you. What's happening with the media space? A space to actually communicate and at least prevent further extremism.
In terms of what society does realize and does not, it's hard for me to say, because I feel like I live in a bubble, you know, and outside this bubble is sometimes a word, like I face it sometimes and I realize how much of a bubble I live in when I talk to people who do not live in that bubble. And, you know, when I think that some things are obvious, like what sexual violence is, and now then I hear a story of my friend who is, you know, telling me a story of sexual violence, and she does not even realize that she had an experience of such, because she just thought that it was normal that this guy just wouldn't leave because he wanted to have sex, and she had to convince him for 2 hours that she won't. And, you know, and she was so surprised that it's sexual violence what was done, even if he didn't touch her, you know. So I live in a bubble, so I really have a problem with like what, and I think that this analysis of, you know, of the currents in which, you know, anti-fascist, feminist, LGBT movement is joining together, you know, and realizing that we have a common agenda, and, you know, the fact that anti-choice is really right now just lost credibility by what's going on with people with disabilities, with what they say that they are not there in front of the parliament. Actually, they have this, you know, stupid van with pictures of a fetus saying that abortion kills, and they go, you know, like in this space. So it's really, they just, you know, I don't know, it's just lost their minds. But still, it's, I'm not really sure how much society is really ready to receive all this, because in a way, our politicians, you know, managed for years to convince us that all these things, especially connected with abortion and LGBT rights, is a matter of beliefs, of some, you know, certain views on life, that it's not, you know, about really fundamentals of our existence. It's just something that you have a view on. So even if there is a law to be discussed in the parliament, or for instance, like, you know, Istanbul Convention, and it's about gender, and it's called like, okay, but it's a delicate issue of something, you know, very like, so it's really, it's not really seen like that. So I think that our work is still for the society to see that it's just our everyday life, that it's not that some feminists here just are talking about some women out there who have abortions, or some couples out there who have children and are raising them in, you know, same-sex relationships, or there are some people out there who something, you know, that we need to realize that it's going on. And the society is, as we say, like, society is not an avocado. It won't get ripe at some point, you know. It's just somebody has to do this work. Somebody has to make it ready. It's not that they, you know, it's just, you know, okay, let's wait, let's put it next to a lemon and it will go faster or whatever. It's just like, really, really, you have to do things to make that society ready for things. Because, you know, it's like the support for LGBT rights or abortion rights is a lot wider than politicians, you know, force us to believe. And I forgot the second question, sorry.
The media space.
Okay, the media. Okay, so it was, yeah. So it just happened with the women's magazine that, you know, it was, because a lot, like, media are tired of talking about abortion, and because we are doing this in a different way, we're finally giving space for experience. We're talking that abortion is normal, it's a common experience, it's not a political declaration, it's not like, tell me if you had an abortion and I will tell you whether you go to church, who you vote for, and how much money you have, and, you know, what city you live in and what kind of work you have. It's just something that connects us, you know, despite all the other things in our lives. And we decided finally to give voices to people with abortion experience, and to talk about abortion, not to politicians, and not about morality, politics, and, you know, the status of a fetus, but experience that we share. And we do that, and so we are called We just talk to people. We have a fan page. We have workshops. We just, using all kinds of things to give that space. And we're talking about, we normalize abortion in the language, so we are not afraid to say that abortion is good, is a public good, and it's really, that we are thankful for the fact that it exists, because if it didn't exist, we could just have, we could just say that we have choice, but with abortion we would have nothing. So we do that, and we are problematic for a lot of people. And the fact that we do it also in very, we decided that abortion finally deserves some colors, some glitter, some, positive atmosphere around it. After all these years that it was put in shadows, and, all the pictures are always of a belly or a woman who just is working, to another direction towards a, window with rain outside and all these things. There always has to be gray and black and sad and, traumatic. So we decided to reverse that and to give space also for positive, empowering experience of abortion. And so we are doing that, and there was one journalist who decided to write about medical abortion with pills firstly, but then she talked to us and she realized that, oh my God, that's something new, so let's just make it an article also about you. And at some point, it got to the idea that we should be on the cover of that magazine. And she said, but it has to say abortion is okay, because I love it. It has to say that. And we're like, okay, let's make t-shirts. So it was a cover with three of us smiling. My smile was outrageous because I showed my teeth. And there were 3 t-shirts saying abortion is okay, and it was a pink background. We destroyed 20 years of feminism in Poland, and we almost destroyed democracy. That's how powerful that cover was. The amount of craziness that, flooded our media after that was just, in a way, funny. And now I'm laughing, but really, it was really frustrating. Of course, it was, a lot of people were like, okay, I saw this, and I realized, I'm not sure what I think about it. But then I'm like, okay, is it about this cover, or is it about me that I have a problem with that? And a lot of people just realized that it's them, and not that cover, We never apologized for the cover. And we would do this exactly the same because, it's really, that's what we believe in. And as we said, it's not like this society will not get ready until somebody does that job. Also, being ready to get all the criticism. But we got a lot of criticism from the pro-choice movement that we destroyed feminists, that we destroyed the Black protest. Yeah, because in 3 days what happened was that the okay thing, okay, I think everybody understands what okay is. So in Poland, people don't understand what okay is anymore. 3 days it took. That okay from being just okay, ended up on Saturday being the adventure of your life, the best thing that can happen to you, and we're like, oh my God. No, sorry, I don't believe in God. Oh, whatever. So it was really, it was really, we at some point I was surprised, but then I'm like, oh my God, no, God, sorry. So I was really, it was frustrating because we really had to, we had interviews, explain the cover. So it was elements, okay, pink. Then I'm like, why pink is bad, It's really also reclaiming pink, because it's we are against also this patriarchal, thing that that sees, all these, stupid girls with pink and all these great boys with blue and, all this. The pink is pink. Come on, and pink is queer as well. And it's whatever. It's it's pink. It's gonna be pink. It's not gonna be, a lot of people say, but maybe gray. But I think it was yellow. It was, blue. Whatever. It was just too bright. And, the fact that we were smiling, that it's disrespectful, that it's not showing solidarity. And, we are the only ones who are showing solidarity. We have these billboards, in Poland that saying that, 1 in 3 of us have had an abortion. You're not alone. And we received messages from those who were traveling to Slovakia. It's like, oh wow, I would have given everything to see that when I was going to get my abortion. I love you for that, because that's exactly what we want to do. And and we were smiling because we love our activism. And it's not that it's always sad, and that when you say abortion you cannot smile. And they were also like, why is it abortion really something for a t-shirt? And I'm like, why veganism is, why anti-fascism is, like you have a lot of statements on your t-shirts, and why abortion cannot be one of them is, beyond me. So yeah, so we have friendly media.
Thank you. Florin, maybe you could share now with us the current dynamics with the referendum in the perspective or the long-awaited referendum, the homophobic referendum to change the constitution in Romania, introduce the heteronormative definition not only of marriage, if I understand, but also of family life. Can you please share with us what is happening? There are all these delays. It's a little bit confusing, but at the same time, as we know from reports, from ILGA's reports, from your reports, that attacks on LGBT community have intensified, and there have been some public attacks also on cultural events related to LGBT movies and so on. Can you explain to us the dynamics? But again, here, because this is an activist roundtable, we are mostly interested in your resistance strategies and alliance building, because as we hear, solidarity is not only a matter of ethical choice, it is a matter of survival and resistance.
Let me start by explaining a little bit what this referendum is about. It started in November 2015 when a bunch of brains decided to get the church support to collect millions of signatures, actually around 3 million signatures, to push for a citizens' initiative that has as the main aim a constitutional amendment. So basically, our opposition managed to get 3 million signatures from regular citizens to reshape the current human rights architecture that's guaranteed in Constitution. Basically, they want to translate from Romanian into Romanian what spouses means. An article that's about the family definition. So what they are trying to do is to come up with a family definition that is extremely restrictive. And in their views, family, it does exist one type of family, and that type of family should be based on the marriage between a man and a woman. In the current text, the marriage is between spouses. So we, technically speaking, will spend several million of dollars, probably around 20 millions, for this act of translation from Romanian into Romanian. That's how this, translation movement started. But if you look careful, I think what they are doing is absolutely brilliant. They managed to use the human rights language, the human rights tactics, the mobilization type of tactics to modify in a very populist way the most fundamental legal text that should protect all of us, not just some of us. What we have done was to postpone indefinitely this referendum to buy time. We knew that we are in a severe crisis of time, and we had to change the public narrative, which was very much focusing on marriage. But guess what? Marriage in Romania is between a man and a woman already, so you don't need to change constitution for that, right? So we knew that we need to modify the public perception through a different type of narrative, and we managed to divert the attention from marriage towards family issues. By doing that, actually, we got a lot of support from various types of family who suddenly realized that, hey, I might get deprived of the constitutional protection. My family is not based on marriage for various reasons, and I still need to be respected as a family by my state. Those voices before this horror were not heard. They didn't exist in the public space. They suddenly realized that they need to reclaim their space. They need to reclaim their family values. They need to reclaim, their political space and to fight back. So that was a great support for us, because it was not just the homosexuals. It was a whole bunch of groups and individuals and organizations, a significant part of society that realized that, hey, this is not a battle about homosexuality. This is a battle about in what type of society we'd like to live in. It's a battle on longer term, and they somehow managed to realize that LGBTI issues were intentionally picked up at this stage because they're not popular, to put it mildly. But we know that once we started using this type of initiatives, so-called citizens initiatives, these guys will continue to touch other very sensitive issues, such as access to abortion, in a country in which more than 10,000 lives, 10,000 of women died under Ceausescu regime. Because of the ban against abortion. Because of unsafe abortions. It's a battle for blocking any attempt to have sex education in the public school. It's a battle for taking away any type of gender recognition for our trans folks. So we knew that it's a larger battle. We somehow managed to activate this type of groups and to shift the attention from marriage to family issues, which I will say it's a success, because the politicians started to get a little bit depressed. What's that? Who on earth are these organizations that are getting popularity? How come they managed to get 3 million signatures while we were voted with more or less the same number of votes? So the politicians realized that if we'll continue like that, we'll open up the Pandora box. And that was another layer of dialogue with politicians. Hey, be aware, what are you doing? We know that this is a serious initiative. We know that you cannot postpone indefinitely, but you have your own role to play into this battle. And the family definition is essential for all of us, and you will be accountable for this type of change. We started also a larger platform called Respect, and Marina, who is here, actually was one of our advisors at that very initial stage. We realized that we need a different type of civic platform to resist to the illiberal trends that just started in our country. We know that it's a long battle, and we created probably the largest civic platform, going way beyond our circles of comfort. And it's an intentional, it's an intentional work to be done. It's not easy to manage coalitions in a country like Romania. All of us are VIPs, so it's difficult to negotiate sometimes among ourselves. Plus, we intentionally get out of the capital, try to reach smaller cities, try to reach universities, try to bring the youth on on our cause. This is something we never done at this scale, and it's good that you were there at that moment of reflection, because that moment of reflection in June 2017 was the moment in which even the political parties started to pay attention to what's going on with these types of initiatives. In the same time, we took a strategic litigation case. It's called Coman case, Adrian Coman and Clay Hamilton case, to push the limits of the Romanian legislation in terms of family rights. So it's basically two guys, a Romanian and American guy, who were married, legally married in Brussels, and out of the blue they asked for the residence right in Bucharest, in Romania, as a family, of course, because they are married. And the General Inspectorate for Immigration said, no, I mean, you are nice guys, but in our eyes, you are not married, you are not a family, so your family rights are stopped at the Romanian border. You cannot be considered here a family. That was the beginning of a very interesting, actually, legal case, which reached the level of the Constitutional Court, who basically addressed the right questions to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. Basically, our Constitutional Court asked the European Court of Justice about how are we supposed to interpret the freedom of movement into the Romanian context, taking into account this family and their rights. Because we are traveling within European Union, not just as individuals, but also as families. And I think very soon, at the beginning of June, we'll have a great decision, hopefully, which, if it's passed, will push the legislation in 6 members of the European Union: Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and there is one more. I'm always forgetting the 6th country. No, Hungary is fine.
We'll look it up.
I will find it out. To modify parts of their family legislation and to accept the LGBTI families once they are married somewhere where this marriage is legal. So it's the beginning of the change. It took more than 5 years to bring this case at this stage, but it will be, you know, a radical case, I will say, that will provoke our countries to modify their current human rights architecture. And hopefully, because of this case, our Romanian politicians will take seriously the civic partnership bill, which is in their hands for more than 10 years. We managed to agree on a draft, the 3rd or the 4th draft, I don't even remember, which will guarantee family rights for those families who are not getting married, including LGBTI families. So we try to use this very hostile situation into our favor. And speaking about the referendum, and I'll stop here not to consume the whole time, our tactic will be a democratic boycott. You know, you are not supposed to modify important human rights, you know, pieces of legislation using this populist methodology. You are not supposed to use democratic means such as referendum to deprive people of their fundamental rights. And I think that this will be also a successful tactic, because we do know that there is not a very, you know, a very happy mood among the family coalition in Romania right now once they knew that we'll boycott the referendum. it will be difficult for them to get almost 6 million people.
Of 30%, and that means
6
million.
around 6 million people to vote. I mean, it's quite a lot. And to vote for what? For something which is already clear, which is already guaranteed in the legislation, that the marriage is between a man and a woman. I mean, people are not stupid.
So I can just sense good vibes from Bucharest.
Well,
Kiran, Carolina mentioned solidarity. You already mentioned this experience of being publicly exposed, and this sense that trans people get, of course, that everything that is their private sense of autonomy is now for public display. This has a lot to do with the enhanced debates, and is very strong, as we know, all from Croatia, because we just went through the horror of Istanbul Convention campaign, where trans people were directly scapegoated in Croatia, to the point where they have been accused for bringing down the whole of Croatian society, the lifestyle, the future, the demographics, everything, everything's like total Armageddon of the country, which is already completely wasted, okay? But, what I wanted to ask you is if you can share with us, because you have an insight into the dynamics and challenges of trans movement across the continent, what are the challenges, and especially how are these vicious attacks harming or on the other hand, enabling the solidarity within the movement, the movements, across the movements?
It's a really interesting time in Europe and globally about trans rights, and all of this sort of comes back again to exposure. But there are more than 20 countries in the Council of Europe that are doing some sort of modification on their legal gender recognition law right now. There are two things going on there. One of them is that those modifications allow for us to have both conversations about legal gender recognition and conversations about law, policy, and the rights of citizens in more constructive ways, and why it matters to have these discussions. But it also is creating and sort of coalescing with the anti-gender response to the Istanbul Convention, and it fits into creating a backlash that's much more complex than it would be were we just talking about legal gender recognition independently. That is also happening at the same time as I'm sure you're all aware, of an extensive amount of immigration and migration in Europe, and that refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers in Europe are particularly undefended when it comes to their recognition before the law, and generally, if someone is seeking asylum with an LGBTI component in their reason for asylum seeking, while there is a sort of back-of-the-hand policy within the UN systems to not doubt that a person is in fact LGBTI if they say so, on a practical basis, very often the case manager looks in not to the situation that the person was in, but into their identity as a basis. So they're questioning the individual as a person, not the situation that they're fleeing. And those types of and then another piece that is also very similar is now there's a movement in Europe to remove the medicalized components of accessing legal gender recognition, and to remove the assessment components of accessing medical transition. Quite frankly, psychiatrists don't know anything about what I think about myself and the construction of gender on the inside. We've put psychiatrists in a position of being able to answer this question because everyone is terrified, not because psychiatrists are in any way good at it. They don't understand gender any more than any of the rest of us do, and they certainly aren't trained to assess my understanding of my gender. But not having someone with a degree in that position to assess whether I am who I say I am terrifies everyone. And that's why they're there. They're not there for any practical purpose. There's no medical reason or psychiatric reason to put someone whose degree really is pharmaceutical psychiatry in a position of deciding what gender I am. It's ridiculous. But what the legal systems in most of Europe do right now is not just require that someone who is unqualified to assess my identity do so, but that a medical certificate be provided to then allow me to access my legal rights. So we've put doctors in a position of determining a legal and administrative question. When there were debates about whether religion or race should be included on people's identity documents, at no point did we say you need to go to a doctor to determine if your race is in fact what you say that it is. At no point did we say that we're going to defer to doctors' opinions about race to make the decision about whether we will include race on an identity card. These are ludicrous concepts, and as a social construction, gender, which is, as I'm sure that we're all aware, a separate thing from sex, but gender as a social construction is just a contract that we as a society agreed on, and now we're putting doctors in the position of gatekeeping our ability to navigate it. And because of the sort of simultaneous nature of Istanbul Convention issues, the anti-gender movement, and other related backlash in Europe, and the change to legal gender recognition laws, we're having a really difficult time getting out from under that medicalization requirement. At the same time, there are extensive efforts to de-psychopathologize trans identities. That's a big word, but de as in remove psychopsychiatry, and pathologize like pathology is a sickness. So to change the conversation about trans people and the way that we just generally live our lives as being not a psychiatric illness. And those movements are pushing for the ability to access legal gender recognition and documentation based on self-determination in a transparent, quick, and accessible process. Unfortunately, there's only one place in this continent that allows that, and they're in the process of assessing their medical components, which are actively pathologizing. That's Malta. However, since 2011, Argentina has had a self-determination-based legal gender recognition law, and there's been no collapse of society. I mean, there's currently a collapse of the peso, but this is unrelated.
Still people going to churches?
Yes, people go to work, people go to church, people get old, people are born, people die, they have birthdays.
They pay taxes?
Yes, Jesus still rises on ascension, like all of these things still happen. And the fear is what sort of pushes these conversations, but the experience actually shows that the fear is unfounded. And sort of to connect back to what the strategies are, the right is using really creative strategies that are about things that require us to do a lot of expensive research. So, for example, one of the things that is the reasons that these medicalization components keep popping up, the explanation, not the real reason, but the explanation is about fraud. What's ridiculous about that is that your identity document is a contract between you and the state. The state verifies who you are and uses your identity document as a mechanism for following that verification. If you commit fraud, there are already laws to punish you for committing fraud. And you don't need to iterate in more detail what fraud is or how fraud works for those laws to still apply. That said, in Argentina, in 8 years almost of a self-declaration model, there's not been a single case of fraud, not one, where the gender identity law was used in any way to commit fraud. So we're not talking about a reality. We're fighting against ghosts and trying to create evidence to disprove myths And as we know, disproving myths is practically impossible. So we have to take that narrative and change it and make it more about the things that we can prove and the things that we can disprove. Because at the end of the day, we can't prove that no one has committed fraud. What we can prove is that no one has been taken to court for committing fraud. But we don't know anything about people's motives. So these are difficult conversations. Yeah, I'll stop for now.
Now it is, I think, right time that we share space with all of you. If somebody would like to ask a question or comment, or we should just continue with the flow of sharing of our speakers. At this point, first of all, I would like to ask you, it is 7:20. Is it okay then that we complete our conversation by 7 o'clock, and then we are going to show the movie for those who are interested? And I guess there is still leeway for informal exchanges outside the city council. So let's spend the last 20 minutes of our conversation on this common landscape that we are sharing, and maybe on what from your experiences you think is something that would be inspiring and useful for others to pick up in terms of sharing experiences from our struggles, looking back, looking forward. And also the important thing is, it seems that we really are in a unique, we have a unique opportunity today. Today is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. And maybe it's always good to go back to our own communities, as all of you mentioned, and really maybe see what improvements and enhancements and encouragement and empowerment of our own solidarity might mean specifically and concretely in the future. What changes you want to see, and what knowledge you would like to share now with others. You know, not to use the ugly word lessons learned, but something that really is worth mentioning and sharing with others in order to prevent or to enhance a struggle based on your own experience.
That's again a lot, but I don't know, I keep saying that, I think I've mentioned that already, but I think it's extremely important. And from my experience, I'm going to just tell you how I realized my mistakes. And I think that it's just too much focus on this, and that maybe we should change that. Because at some point I realized that talking about different things that I fight for, I use the defensive language of what I don't want, right? Of what I don't want to be taught that I want. So when I'm focusing on something, I'm saying that, okay, but I don't want that, or I'm not going to talk about that right now. For instance, it's all these statements, in terms of abortion, it's all these statements that, yeah, of course we want abortions to be as rare as possible, and of course we want wide access to contraception, and abortion being the last thing you resort to. And yes, it's about choice. We're not pro-abortion, we're pro-choice. It's not that I want to have an abortion, you know, or I wish anyone to have an abortion, but let's make it acceptable, and things like this. In terms of LGBT, it's like, you know, when you have one thing on the agenda and you're asked like, but what with adoption? No, it's not let's talk about hate crime now. It's not like, let's not have this conversation on adoption or marriage equality. It's not about safety. It's about protecting people from violence. So let's talk about hate crime and, you know, that we don't want to. And we are saying all these things, of course, sometimes because somebody's asking these questions, like media or politicians or, you know, those we negotiate with. But sometimes we're just answering those questions because we have them so deep in our head, that because we don't want to be accused of the ones that actually want marriage equality and with adoption, that actually want freedom of abortion. We don't want to be seen as those. And we are sending these messages through an empty channel, because on that other side of this channel, there's absolutely nobody who listens to us. Nobody cares. Politicians don't care. Journalists don't care. Nobody cares. But here, so we're using that channel and we're thinking that somebody's listening to us. And here, we have a bunch of people who don't want to hear that. We are having those people who raise their children in same-sex relationships, and they don't want to hear that adoption is bad, that we don't want marriage equality, or we just fighting for hate crime. There are people who have abortion experience or who have helped others with having an abortion, and they don't want to hear that there should be less abortions or that you should do anything possible not to get pregnant, because if you don't, then you're irresponsible and you should not have access to anything. These people are listening to that. I don't want to hear that. So at some point I realized I don't want to talk to some people who don't listen to me and who won't do anything to change it. I want to talk to all these people and show them solidarity, show them that I do care about their lives. Because sometimes especially with when I say that, okay, it's not about adoption, it's not about recognizing the diversity of families, it's not about trans issues, it's just about hate crime or whatever, I'm actually sending the message that your things are not important to me. Your life is not important. You just live out there, sit in quiet, and maybe in the 10 years, I'll start talking about your issues. And it's just not fair. And, when I'm saying that I want abortions to be rare, I'm sending a message that abortion is something bad. Those people who have had experience of abortion, they don't want to hear that there was a bad thing. They don't want to be, condemned for that. They don't want to hear that they should have used contraception or whatever, or that abortion is always a hard decision or whatever, So we realized at some point with my colleagues that I'm doing my activism with, that we don't want to talk to these people that don't listen to us, that we want to show solidarity, and we want to show that it is important and that it is crucial that we actually say what we really want, and that we are not representing anyone. At some point it's especially this high feminist movement, sitting on panels and saying things on behalf of other people, who are out there somewhere, I don't know, victims of violence who cannot be here standing for themselves, as if it wasn't that, there are people who experience violence among audience at such panels, because why wouldn't they be? So it's a common experience, we have it. So it's really, talking from this, okay, we are just talking about some issues, some people, and, and let's just negotiate with politicians, that it should be representation, that we should talk about our experiences, that we should not represent, the issues that we have people to speak for themselves about. So I think that normalization of experiences, of language, and that's visibility in this way, that we are talking about things that are common, that are not some political, religious concepts, that we have, academic panels about, and, political debates about, that these are our lives, that it's just something that we have every day. And we live in this society as, people who have different issues, who have different characteristics, and because of that are treated badly. And, that we are out there talking about reality, what's going on, that these are not just concepts, that we just have theoretical discussions about. And what I think is that there is a lot of stigmatization, in different groups, and also self-stigmatization, self-stigma. And we have to bust that, start talking about things in a normal way without shame, because of course, we all know where it came from, that, somebody took a lot of effort to put that in that shame, that we are ashamed of things, that we cannot go out there and talk about our experiences because we were taught to be ashamed. And that busting this stigmatization that we have inside of us, it will also help with stigma in society. But stigma is around different things is one of the worst enemies, I think. So, we need to realize that that this was put on us, and not because we're doing something wrong, but because somebody wants everybody to think that things are wrong. And pro-lifers, they don't want to limit abortions. They want everyone to think that abortion is bad. That's their goal. They don't want to save lives. They don't want anything like that. They want everyone to think that it's bad. It's the same with gender. It's the same with, so it's like they just, make this evil atmosphere around things because that's what makes them strong. And, so this agenda is also false, but we should not let that happen and, be in a way empowered by who we are, because there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, this, no matter what kind of experience, connected with different issues that we are having and different characteristics that we're having. We are, just, it's us, it's our lives, and it's important, and it's not a, political issue, but it's just real life. And I think it's just time to realize that we should, give space for that to be out there, visible and, proudly exposed in a way, and shameless, of course.
Thank you, Carolina. And then we'll make another round about solidarity. Thank you. So, normalization and destigmatization and empowerment and going back to ourselves and looking where we have internalized this shame and sense that we are evil if we live our lives in line with our human rights. Florin, what would you like to share with us? You have already shared a lot, but something that you believe it makes sense that we remember from your struggles, mistakes, and VIP adventures.
I'm not sure I'm having lessons to preach, especially here. What
or
I
something
know for
that you
sure,
learned yourself.
Yeah, what I know for sure is that solidarity doesn't come in a natural way. I will say it's an outcome more than a process. And it's a goal which we should mobilize all of us in itself, because the other path is the path of religious fanaticism and politically liberalism. So I will say that in many ways, solidarity, it's a kind of moral obligation and a political obligation for all of us. And it's part of our duty to reinvent ourselves all the time, looking also to what the religious right is doing. Simply because I think they are few steps ahead of us, and not being defensive, but at the same time staying focused on what they are doing is not a bad choice. And it's tactically important. We have to know what the others are preparing, because we know that they will affect our lives sooner or later. And it's good to be preventive, I'm not sure if preemptive, not preemptive words, but preemptive tactics. Finally, I think what's important for me at this stage is to create a space in which our diverse identity can be negotiated, even among ourselves. And I'll give you one example. Even within the LGBT community, we have difficulties to digest tea. Of course, I'm generalizing this reality, but it's part of the naked truth. It's there, even within our community. So we are still having steps to do, even in our small circles, which means that sometimes it's rather difficult to explain our issues to a larger audience. And this is our rapid goal, I will say, to negotiate a table of urgent issues which need to be solved now. And when I'm saying now, it's not about today or tomorrow, it's about this decade, because we are losing precious times. It's not about creating hierarchies between rights. It's not about creating false tensions between groups. It's about creating tactics that work in our society. Because some things which might work in Germany will definitely not work in Romania and might be difficult to be organized in Croatia or in Poland. We really have to pay attention to the local specificities. And I think that's why we need to reinvent ourselves constantly. I think we are doing a good job doing that, and looking to what's on the table in this period of the time in various countries. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. The speed is not great. Our tactics are sometimes debatable, but actually we are more stronger than ever. Let me say that this is especially for our colleague Carolina, who might feel depressed from time to time. And I do know this feeling. It's the natural reaction to what's going on in our societies, in our environments is tough. That's why we need to recreate, to reinvent ourselves and to reinvent what solidarity means for all of us. That's a constant type of work. And I think we are getting better in creating alliances and networks of solidarity in the last, let's say, 2-3 years. So I'm rather optimistic, even against reality sometimes.
Just to be clear, I don't feel depressed. I feel frustrated sometimes, but I feel very strong and unstoppable, and it's really...
And just to answer the question quickly, because I don't want to disrespect your time, I have just two things worth mentioning for others that are really specific stories, and one of the worth mentionings for me is stop compromising. In the beginning of this year, the Portuguese legislature passed a law that should have given self-declaration access to people 16 and up in Portugal to being able to change legal gender recognition documents. Last week, the president of Portugal vetoed that law, sending it back to the legislature, saying that the reason he has a problem with it is that 16-year-olds should not be able to access self-declaration. They need a medical supervision. And the response among trans activists in Portugal is no. We don't. The way that the system works in Portugal is the president can send it back to the legislature, they can make an amendment, and then the president has a second chance, or the legislature can decide not to amend it and send it again, in which case the president is not allowed to veto it by constitution. And while it would be very easy to say, okay, we will take that compromise, some sort of medical intervention for 16 to 18-year-olds. Once you turn 18, then access to self-determination. However, the activists are standing strong at this moment, saying we want the bill as it was written or no bill at all. And I think that type of an unwillingness to compromise is something that we need to relearn in our movements. Compromise doesn't gain ground for us. It more actively excludes those of us at the margins. And that's not what progress looks like. The other story I want to tell is about really a European point of view, which is there is a much bigger world than Europe. And the thing worth mentioning is learn from activists and legislatures in the global South. The best Supreme Court decisions in the world about trans issues are outside of Europe. They are in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal. They are in, as of day before yesterday, in Costa Rica. There's an extraordinary decision in Costa Rica's Supreme Tribunal on Monday or Tuesday. Amazing. One of the best decisions in the history of legal gender recognition. Learn from the global South. The best laws in the world are in Nepal and Argentina. Learn from the Global South. We seem to think that we're at the forefront of these movements as Global North, as Europe, and we're not. We're just the biggest voice in a room dominated by white voices and white faces. And we have a lot that we can learn by learning to speak other languages that are not European languages, and by paying attention to what's going on in activist movements and in legislatures in the Global South.
Thank you all. So some of the key words are: let us de-Europeanize, let us globalize, let us destigmatize first ourselves and then the society, let us normalize our right to our rights, and let us solidarize all over again, and let us understand that solidarity is the safest and the longest running strategy, not only for survival, but for transformation of our societies. Thank you all, and maybe let us thank with a clap to our speakers. And now, for all of you who feel like it, maybe to get a little bit more frustrated, more infuriated, and more empowered, let us now watch the 15-minute film, Abortion, Backlash in Europe, as an extra impetus for a wonderful, cheerful, proud walk for freedom in Rijeka on Saturday.
I'm the mother of Valentina Miluzzo, a wonderful young lady who'd always dreamed of being a mother.
September 2016. Valentina is 4 months pregnant. The young Sicilian is expecting twins. It's a difficult pregnancy. Valentina is admitted to Catania Hospital. Her condition worsens.
Valentina opens her eyes and says to me, "Mama, I'm dying." And the doctor says, "What was it he said?"
He told us, "I have a conscientious objection to abortion. I don't murder babies. Their little hearts are still beating."
All I know is when my daughter went in there, she was fine, and they sent her home to us in a coffin.
The fetus's lives were put ahead of the mother's life, against the family's wishes. But the right to conscientious objection isn't supposed to apply in emergency situations. In Italy, 2 out of 3 gynecologists are opposed to abortion. A situation with links to the Catholic Church, whose stance has not budged an inch.
Every human life is a unique part of humanity's heritage. That's why eliminating this being, this human life, is a crime against humanity.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to shout out your love for life?
All across Europe, a new generation of Catholics is stepping forward, promoting its uncompromising values with modern communication tools. In France, they march with catchy slogans and wield information like weapons online.
There are real risks of sterility and depression after an abortion.
In Spain, they twisted Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy's arm. That was back in 2014. Enormous rallies put heavy pressure on the conservative ruling party. A bill limiting abortion rights was brought before the parliament. Pro-abortion activists had to take to the streets themselves to get Rajoy to back down. But the leader of Spain's pro-life movement, Ignacio Arzuaga, sees the loss as a small victory.
I've talked to members of the Popular Party and they tell me that if we hadn't launched those petitions, successful petitions, if we hadn't mobilized society, if we hadn't organized these huge rallies, probably the Popular Party would have not assumed that commitment to protect life in Spanish law.
Ignacio Arzuaga joins forces with activists from other countries and takes the fight to Brussels. The European Union has no jurisdiction over abortion rights, but it does shell out more than €500 million to fund abortions and contraceptive services in developing countries. Arzuaga and his friends want to cut off that funding.
Why should we give the money, our European money, the money that finally, ultimately comes from our taxes, in order to perform abortions?
Their primary weapon is a petition launched Europe-wide, One of Us. In one short month, it garners 1.7 million signatures, an all-time record.
One of Us really got the anti-choice movement off the ground. They obtained a hearing before the European Parliament and a meeting with the European Commission. It gave them a level of credibility they hadn't had before.
Abortion opponents have been toiling behind the scenes ever since. Here in Brussels, for instance.
Hi. How are you doing? Yeah, it's been a long time, hasn't it? Yes.
Sofia Kubi is one of the pro-life lobbyists spreading the good word.
Welcome, everyone. This is one of our briefings, short briefing sessions. We try to do it at lunchtime because that's maybe, when you have most times. We have universally accepted definition of
Sofia Kubi and her colleagues have a public narrative for political leaders and the media. But apparently, there's also a hidden side to their work. A behind-the-scenes network, a community called Agenda Europe that steers clear of the media. The organizers of these secret meetings include a familiar name, Sofia Kubi.
What was the purpose of keeping the Agenda Europe meeting secret?
It's no secret that we have meetings and work together.
But it's written right on the documents not to talk about it. It says right on the operating documents not to talk to journalists, not to talk about the event in public, not to say people are meeting. It's written right on the documents.
Well, it's no secret that people are working together. But there has to be a way for us, and this goes for everybody else too, whether it's the European Union or whoever, to meet outside the public arena.
Agenda Europe prefers to do its string pulling from the shadows, especially as its underlying goals could stir up a scandal.
This document sets out the program for Agenda Europe and for the homophobic anti-choice movement in Europe.
The acceptance of divorce, contraceptive practices, abortion, homosexuality, surrogate motherhood, etc., has implications not only for those directly involved, but for society at large. What results therefrom is a process of decivilization, the moral decline of a society.
We see how they say we've only got 10 to 20 years before Western civilization crumbles under a perverse ideology that seeks to extend human rights.
Sofia Kubi is the head of the European Bureau of ADF International. Its parent organization is on the other side of the Atlantic, the Alliance Defending Freedom. Between 2013 and 2015, ADF tripled its funding for Europe, which jumped from 800,000 to nearly 2.5 million euros. The pro-life community is going strong in America, with the support of the Vice President himself, Mike Pence.
Life is winning again in America.
The movements are there, and I think what we see with the Trump presidency is that these marginal groups are now mainstream. Seeing that they're making investments in Europe, I think that's a cause for great concern and a reason to pay close attention and to be responsive.
There is another multinational power broker at work here.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live.
The American Center for Law and Justice. Its chief counsel hosts a daily radio program and a weekly TV show. Jay Sekulow.
So the House of Representatives passed by one vote the American Health Care Act. In it is the very clear defunding of groups like Planned Parenthood. Very happy that this was a win. We fought very hard for this. You fought very hard with us. This is a good win.
Jay Sekulow is also Donald Trump's lawyer. And he too has invested heavily in Europe, shilling out 4 million euros between 2013 and 2015. His spokesman in Brussels is a Frenchman named Gregor Papin, who is also the legal representative for the One of Us petition.
We demand that an ethics clause be included in European regulations that explicitly excludes any activity that involves the destruction of human life from European funding.
One of Us, a pro-life success story with a whiff of American influence to it. The international pro-life movement has another capital, a rather surprising one at that, Moscow. Russian oligarchs are helping fund the cause. Men like Konstantin Malofeev. This vocal Putin supporter is on Europe's visa blacklist for purportedly financing separatist militias in Ukraine. Malofeev started his own television channel, Tsargrad, an ultra-conservative media outlet that gained fame for its openly anti-gay programming.
Hello. We get accused often of not liking the United States and being aggressive toward homosexuals, but that's not true. In California, they recently proposed making it easier for Russian perverts to get visas. The Tsargrad channel team supports this initiative. What's more, we're ready to pay for a one-way ticket for every single person who's seriously ready to emigrate and can show us a medical certificate that confirms their homosexuality or any other form of perversion.
Konstantin Malofeev also finances maternity homes like this one. They take in pregnant women in distress after convincing them not to have an abortion. But the oligarch has his sights on Europe as well.
Do you finance some pro-life movements in Europe?
No, I finance pro-life movement in Russia.
We've heard some documents showing that you were financing some movements like Citizen Go.
From me?
Yeah.
Konstantin Malofeev?
Yeah.
Personally?
Yeah.
Not sure.
No?
You better show me the document.
You want? I have the document.
Yeah, please show.
I have a letter here from him asking you the money. It's
No, probably they asked. We didn't sign this, as I know. Because I'm not this a director of my foundation, but as I know, we didn't finance this.
This is one of those documents. A letter signed by Spanish activist Ignacio Arzuaga on behalf of his advocacy group Citizen Go. In it, he asks Malofeev for a grant, 100,000 euros.
There are some documents showing that you asked for some money from Konstantin Malofeev for 100,000 euros.
That's correct. We didn't receive €1 from Konstantin Malofeev.
In his letter, the Spaniard lays out a closely detailed agreement for the Russian donor.
In return for his 100,000 euros contribution, Citizen Go promises to reserve a seat on his board of trustees for a representative of Konstantin Malofeev's foundation. A few months later, a certain Alexei Komov, Mr. Malofeev's right-hand man, has joined Citizen Go's board. It would seem the contract was indeed fulfilled.
This is information that has been stolen, that you shouldn't be publishing, because at the end of the day, it's private information.
But I can ask you the question if it's true.
Yes, you can ask me the question, but you cannot mention the information that was leaked by the people that stole that information. That's. But again, we received. I can tell you many times, but we received €0 from Konstantin Malofeev.
In the anti-abortion universe, there is a network within the networks, a coalition that brings together all the key actors. It is called the World Congress of Families, and it has been convening every year for the past decade.
It's my pleasure as well to welcome you here to the 11th World Congress of Families in the beautiful city of Budapest. And we're here to protect human life from conception to natural death.
The conference's speakers include some familiar names.
We have suffered these attacks against the natural family, against our children, and against our freedoms.
This man is one of the organizers, the American Alan Carlson.
We're coming together to get to know each other better, to learn from each other, to share information and strategies, and to build an informal, but I hope very effective global coalition that will advance pro-life and pro-family ideas and agendas at international gatherings, at the United Nations, or over here in Europe within the European Union.
The European Union. One of its poorest students is one of this year's hosts, Hungary, led by Viktor Orban. And Orban will give the gathering's most disturbing speech.
We have succeeded in closing the Balkans route to illegal immigration. While there are more and more people surrounding us, in Europe, our population is on the decline. Our goal is to have as many children in Hungary as possible. I wish you all much courage, perseverance, and mutual strength. Thank you for your attention.
This model is taking shape before our very eyes. A closed society that dreams of closing borders and policing bodies. And there is no room for abortion in this authoritarian project. Women will not have the choice anymore. Pro-life versus pro-choice, an all-important battle that is forging the future for all of us.
I hope you enjoyed the film. And since Neil is here with us, who is one of the, also as you could see, resources for this really important documentary, which is going to be, no, I can speak in Croatian actually. No, I'll speak in English. That is going to be shown in Mali Lošinj tonight, in Split tonight, in Zagreb tomorrow, which is another action that we are planning before Walk for Life. Maybe if you have just 2 minutes, as a post-festum, like the shortest Q&A in history, maybe just to ask Neil, if you could share with us, what is your greatest hope, since you are deeply involved in following the darkness of backlash, what is your hope for Europe and the world where homophobia and transphobia will be seen as those states of mind which require assistance, but not freedom of gender and freedom of inequality. So what do you hope for today in Europe? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Marina. In terms of what I hope for, maybe at different levels. One thing is with this film, I hope that European societies will wake up about what this essentially a hate movement is all about. And I'd just like to echo the words that Carolina raised earlier. The anti-abortion movement, the actors behind it are identical, more or less, to the homophobic movement. In the end, from their world perspective, we're all talking about some form of illegal sex. It doesn't matter who's doing it, but it's not between a man and a woman with the purpose of procreation, so it's equally illegal no matter what. It's the same thing, and we need to find a way of addressing human rights in a more cohesive way. Secondly, another hope I have is that these actors try to pass themselves off as nice little Christians, often the victims of progressive advances. We can see here, you just saw Ignacio Arzuaga, the Spanish guy. he's more bothered by the fact that documents are shown in public. He's not at all bothered to be associated with a Russian oligarch who funds separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine. That tells you quite a bit about their moral center. So I hope we wake up to, one, what is our common agenda, and how this movement also doesn't mind flirting with anti-democratic movements. And so that, and finally, just a third point, and that we understand that basically what we're fighting for and the resistance that we're meeting right now is because we are making gains, okay? The homophobic initiatives in Eastern Europe, in large part, they are a reaction to the advance of equal marriage in Western Europe and in other countries. And so we are making gains. It's frustratingly slow, particularly if one is personally concerned by some of these drawbacks. But in the end, the anti-choice are having a bad week. The One of Us that was just shown in the film, the One of Us initiative, has just been rejected by the European Court just last week. One of the protagonists who's involved in a number of these things is under investigation for fraud. They're having a bad time right now, and we're making headway. So that's what we should be mindful of. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I can understand the frustration when one finds something about some of these individuals or groups and it comes out in the public and it doesn't have as much impact as we would like it. I don't know if I would agree it doesn't matter. The steady stream of the accumulation of all of these things does matter. And we need to see this not as we can make one big win at one point, but it's slow incremental progress that we're making. We've made slow incremental progress in most of the human rights that we're talking about. It will be a similar process also to chip away at their credibility. And this credibility that they have now, it has taken them 5 to 10 years to build, and we can see it falling apart and being chipped away much more quickly than the time it took for them to build it up. But there's some strategies that we're perhaps lacking. We haven't developed at European level yet, across borders, methods of exchanging information. So that, for example, you know your people here in Croatia, I may know these people in Brussels, but we don't know each other's, and they're speaking to each other. And so sometimes your bad people are speaking to very bad people in others, but it's just a foreign name that you don't know. So we need to be able to develop this cross-border exchange of information. One thing that I found is that no matter with a number of these anti-choice, anti-human rights protagonists, no matter how far the more you scratch beneath the surface, the more they are connected with rather frightening elements in society, elements of society that we thought had been gone from European countries many decades ago, but the descendants are still there, and there is a continuum of interrelationships between anti-human rights in sexuality and reproduction with far-right extremist neo-fascist groups and populist groups. And also groups and countries, even states, that have different geopolitical interests than the European Union and many countries here, different non-democratic states. The more we are able to interconnect all of these, the more we can make the case. We're only at the beginning, so it's frustratingly slow, but we are making headway. mean, our side, we've had some bad practices on our side. Very often what I've seen is that when these things start happening in a certain country, the national progressive advocates tend to underestimate the importance of it and then separately feel embarrassed that this is happening in their country. This is not what they thought their country was about, and therefore don't talk about it as much to partners in others. And by the time it gets out of hand, then it's out of hand, and there's very little that can be done. We need to overcome these this reticence, and we also need to understand that this happens in every single country. One of the things that is going to happen in the European courts this year is a test case of a midwife in Sweden who claims who says she's Christian and therefore cannot get a job as a midwife because she doesn't want to perform abortion, and therefore she's a victim of discrimination. This is happening in Sweden, perhaps one of the most progressive countries in Europe. A similar case is being prepared in Norway. So every country in the continent is affected, and so we need to build the mechanisms so that we can resist this effectively. I mean, I think what you've just mentioned is very important. I mean, one thing, in fact, one thing that we're witnessing with this is a steady radicalization of Christianity, where the most radical elements within different Christian faiths, and in Agenda Europe, the network that was raised there, it's mainly Catholic. The Catholics are organizing this. The second component are the Orthodox, and then you have traditionalist Protestants from different countries. And it is the most radicalized elements within that which have basically hijacked church teaching, reinterpreted it in such a way so it fits a normative agenda that they had predetermined, and then try to pass this off as the mainstream position of those religions. And so we can recognize radicalization and call it for what it is when it takes place in Islam, but the same process is beginning within certain Christian faiths, and we need to recognize it for what it is. In this, I think Florian is a better advocate or spokesperson than I am, but in this case, there needs to be reaching out and involvement of faith-based communities so that there's also different voices that are expressed about the mainstream religions, if only also to show that there's a diversity of view, and always has been. There has never been a monolithic view on these issues, even within the Catholic Church. The idea that marriage between a man and a woman has existed for 2,000 years is a 20th century invention. If you go back in history, that's simply not the way it was. So I think we need to recognize the process for what it is.